Back when I was 18, I landed my first steady job. It was a part-time position at a local cinema. When I look back, I can honestly say it was the best place, or one of the best places I've worked at, even though it was paying minimum wage. It was a fun environment to work in. Most of my colleagues were of a similar age to me, and overall it was just a vibe, although there were some toxic people I met along the way. I spent nearly 5 years at this place and saw a lot of things go down. Today I'm going to share some of those moments with you. It might not be obvious, but cinemas go through a lot of food waste. This isn't food on the shelves or in the storage room. This is food actually sold to the customers. Popcorn, nachos, hot dogs, etc. The biggest item that gets wasted is soft drinks, and it should be no surprise. Cinemas don't make much from ticket sales. The real profit comes from the food that they actually sell to customers, and this is why cinema food is ludicrously expensive. So to entice customers into parting with their cash, they give out outrageously large portions as a way of falsely convincing customers that they're getting a good deal. Suddenly, they can't finish the food. After a movie finishes, a team is assigned to clean up after the guests before opening for new guests. Popcorn and crumbs on the seats and floor would be swept up, whilst larger items like popcorn in bags and drinks would be placed in a black bag, and then that will be transferred to the compactor, which is accessed via the fire exit. Occasionally, careless guests would spill drinks and cheese sauce and salsa, jalapenos all over the seats. Now the seats, they were of a fabric material, so you can only imagine they would soak up the spillage. And so these seats became very manky and disgusting. The day finally came to get the cinema refitted. New seats, new carpet, fresh look. The problem was the contractors that were signed to do the refit, they left the fire doors open throughout the night. The same fire doors that led to the waste compactor. It wasn't long before the cinema started to have a rodent problem. Despite this, we were specifically instructed to ignore the elephant in the room, even acting surprised and shocked when a customer will report a sighting of a rat. Sweet popcorn gets delivered in a bag that's about 5.5 feet tall and 30 centimeters wide. This is then kept in the storeroom and retrieved when popcorn on the shelf is low. One of my colleagues went to the storeroom to retrieve a bag and came to the front of the shelf to actually pour the popcorn out. And as they opened the bag, to their horror, they found a dead rat inside the bag. The cinema continued to serve customers and did not close temporarily for hygiene reasons. There's a reason why to this day, I will never, ever sit at the back of the cinema. It was common practice that guests would take the term Netflix and chill to a whole nother level. I guess in their mind, they felt like it was the perfect public place to get freaky. It's dark and loud, so no one will notice, right? Right? Wrong. What these silly guests didn't realize is that we had night vision cameras inside the screens, and we normally caught them in the act. I vividly remember one couple coming through, and before they had even decided what film they wanted to watch, the question that they asked was, which screen is the quietest? This was already a major red flag, because the commonality between guests that commit the offense in question is that they asked that very question. Another commonality was that typically a certain demographic would be committing this act. There was a pattern. This couldn't be ignored. It was clear as day. And this couple fitted that demographic. The third red flag was that this couple didn't buy any food. Now on its own, this wouldn't really mean much. There are plenty of people and couples who refuse to pay the extortionate prices that are set by the cinema. But there was a pattern that could not be ignored. This particular demographic, normally when they're on their good behavior, are the customers that spend the most food in the cinema. They buy the most popcorn, they buy the most nachos, they buy the most drinks, they buy the most everything. It just so happens that this very same demographic, when they are up to no good, they either buy no food at all, or maybe they'll just buy like a popcorn. Maybe they're doing that just to throw us, but they think they're throwing us, but they're not. And that makes sense, right? If you're going to the cinema to perform a certain act, you're not interested in the movie or the food that accompanies it. So anyway, we watch them go to their quiet screen and we catch them in the act on the monitor doing the thing. One of my colleagues had the fun assignment of walking in on them mid-act with security and requesting that they leave the cinema. The lady was so embarrassed. I remember her running out of the screen covering her face. The guy, on the other hand, he was the very opposite of embarrassed. This guy was grinning in ear to ear like he had just walked into a gentleman's club for the very first time. Even had the audacity to ask to see the footage played back on the monitor. Needless to say, I never saw that couple ever again. A typical cinema in the UK has an ice cream stand that usually serves Haagen-Dazs or Ben & Jerry's. Also has a pick and mix stand, which is a section where you get to pick your sweets, or as Americans call candy. You pick an assortment of sweets, you weigh it, you pay for it. And then the main stand, which has the popcorn, the nachos, the rest of the confectionaries. That's where most of the guests go to. The main stand area was divided into two parts. So you had the first part, which was where the products were on display for sale and staff standing by the tills waiting for guests to serve. The second part was at the back end, obscured by a high wall. And this back end, it served as like a quasi kitchen. So it had a microwave, it had a sink for washing utensils and other things like that. It also had this large kettle which we used to pop salted popcorn. Cameras were trained on the tills to make sure staff didn't get any sticky fingers. There was a loophole that staff did exploit, but I'll leave that for another day. Although the viewing angle of the camera was quite broad, it was obscured by the high wall I mentioned earlier, so it was impossible to see what people were doing at the back end unless they were physically there. Occasionally a food or drink would be prepared as per the guest's request, who would then later change their mind. So unless there was another guest who was ready to take that order, we weren't allowed to actually sell those items. The process then would be to place the food or drink on that high wall and later record it as a damaged item. So of course there was a quota of how many items we could have damaged in any given day. It was an open secret that staff would go to the back and consume this food, knowing full well that the camera would only see their hands retrieve the goods. Some supervisors were quite militant in ensuring that goods did not get wasted. And even in the case that goods had to be damaged, they would see to it that it was disposed of properly. However, it was impossible for them to be on the ground all the time, especially on Friday and Saturday nights, which were very busy. One of my colleagues, who is a good friend of mine and who I helped get a role at this local cinema, he popularized a hack of deliberately getting a guest order wrong so that he could damage off those goods. So we would all go around to the back and it would be a food frenzy of us just stuffing our faces. Another popular hack was making too many hot dogs close to closing time, knowing full well that it's very unlikely they would all sell. And again, food frenzy. To this day, I still don't understand why they didn't get cameras at the back. See you next week.